Okay, so now that we're ready to start working with a little more advanced stuff, we're going to open up a few more window palettes. And so we've already got layers open, we've already got swatches open, and we've already got color open. I'm going to go to the layers and we're just going to get into a little more detail about what's going on in the layers palette. So there's this little arrow, okay? So that allows you to expand what's in your layer. You can also resize this if you want to see a little more. But you can see that this is a rectangle. If I make a copy of it, Control C, Control V, makes another rectangle. So when I select this one, this little blue dot shows up here. That means I've got that one selected. If I click that, that one's selected. I can also use this palette to control what's selected. And this often becomes really useful once your graphics get more complex. But as a primitive, we can see that it's there. So for this exercise, we're going to go back up to the selection tool. And we're just going to explore the difference between the selection tool and the direct selection tool. You'll notice that with the selection tool selected, I have these, what are called handles. So these do different things. The one in the corner of the shape resizes them. So if I just click and drag on that, I can change the size around of my shapes. If I hold down the Shift key while I do that, I can scale things without distorting them. So that's like a restricted scale. But if I let go of Shift, then it reshapes them. So a lot of times we don't want to distort stuff, so we just hold down Shift. We also have, if we don't hover right over it, but go out here, you'll see it switches to like this little kind of curved thing. That's the rotate tool. So we can click and drag to rotate our shapes. And if we want to go in 45-degree increments, we can hold down Shift and it'll just snap to 45 and 90. And all of them do that. Whichever one you want to grab, they'll do the same thing. If you hover your pointer the other way, you'll see there's this path corner tool here. So this is that corner rounding thing that I was talking about. So this is why the rounded rectangle tool is completely redundant, because the basic rectangle, in fact all shapes, have a rounded corner option built in. So we don't need to worry about using that rounded rectangle. If we want to get rid of our round, we just snap it and it disappears, takes the rounding off. But that's always an option. These middle handles, these are just restricted to scaling in that one direction. So the bottom here stretches this way, the right just stretches that way. And it's kind of a little bit of an easier way, but it distorts and resizes in one direction. That's all it does. And then if you just want to move this whole shape, just click anywhere inside the shape you want to move, and that just moves it around on your screen. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to the direct selection tool and see how it does things a little differently. So you'll notice right away when I click it, my handles disappeared, and now we just see the anchors. A rectangle just has 4 anchors. You can click and move shapes around using the direct selection tool by clicking in the middle, but as soon as you click on an anchor, right, if all of them are selected, so this is how we know they're selected, is they're all blue on each corner. And they're blue because that just happens to be the color of the layer that I've got the shape on. It might be something a little different, or sometimes you end up with a color that's not convenient for what you're working. You can always double click on the layer, and then you've got your color for the layer options. You could, let's change it to something higher contrast, like I don't know, grass green. This is just purely so that you can see it. So now I can see those icons or those anchors are green. So if you click with the direct selection tool in the middle of a shape, it basically behaves exactly the same as a selection tool. But the difference with the direct selection tool is you can select one anchor, and that allows you to move that anchor point. And because these are straight lines, it's going to adjust the shape accordingly. And you can also just affect just the roundness of that one corner. You can multi-select by clicking and dragging. So it's kind of got a marquee select, so that allows you to just grab those 2. So do that with your shape. Get comfortable with it. You can also shift click to multi-select. So if I want to go and add this next anchor, I'm going to hit shift, hold down the shift key and click, and that's going to also select 2. So it does exactly the same thing as clicking and dragging. And the reason we do that is we often have shapes overlapping and we can't really easily click and drag. So that's what the shift is all about. You can also click anywhere on a line segment, and that will do the same thing as clicking the 2 things, right? So if I move that, it's moving that segment. Click there, it bends out that segment, moves the two handles around. So what you're seeing here, these are called handles, and they adjust the curve, the Bezier curve between those 2 points. So you can also, with the direct selection tool, really change the way that curve is defined just by adjusting those handles. So we use this a lot for customizing our shapes. So in basic recourse, or basic review, excuse me, you've got the main selection tool, which is just for moving, rotating, and scaling. And then we've got the direct selection tool, which also is for moving, but not rotating, but also customizing individual shapes. So those two tools together really work hand in hand to do different things. As well, the group selection tool, if there's groups, we'll get into groups later, it would select that whole group. You really don't end up using that much because, again, it kind of crosses over with what the selection tool does. So for the most part, the two defaults here are all you're going to need. So as your kind of little exercise, make those shapes, mess around with them like I did, hit save, and then we'll move on to the next video.